The NFL scouting combine is complete, and it's a defensive-heavy draft class this year. So will the Falcons go edge rusher in the first round for the first time since Takk McKinley went in 2017? Time will only tell with this franchise, but someone who can tell us a whole lot about how things went in Indianapolis this year is my good friend Josh Kendall, Falcons beat writer for The Athletic. And Josh, it's always good to see you. You spent some time up there in Indianapolis talking with Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot. Fontenot usually talks about best player available, at least he has in recent draft years. But what do you feel like their approach is to the draft this year?
Well, this year, best player available better mean best edge rusher or cornerback available. It certainly means best defensive player available. The NFL teams get 45 over the course of the combine week. They get 45 formal interviews, which last 18 to 20 minutes. The Falcons said they plan to use all 45 of theirs on defensive players. That's how serious they are about focusing on the defense and trying to fill some holes there. The most obvious of those holes is edge rusher or cornerback. And I think that the best player available approach in those two positions will sync up pretty well this year because you can find some guys who potentially are rookie difference makers at both spots, I think around 15.
So you feel pretty confident they're going to go defense no matter what in the first round?
I'll be shocked. If they draft another offensive player, I don't know what we will do. Many Falcons fans will throw things at their television. Yes, I would bet almost any amount of money that they would take a defensive player. I would have also bet last year at this time that they would not be taking a quarterback. So
I was just about to say last year shocked us all, and perhaps we get that again, but it does feel like they're going to go defense for sure. You know, a few reports out there indicating that the Falcons are pretty open to trading their first-round pick to gain some of that more draft capital. They don't have as many picks as they probably would like to have. Josh, do you think that this is something that would actually make sense for Atlanta?
It would make sense for sure, but I'm skeptical that they're going to be able to get it done. The reason I say that is teams this time of year start to fall in love with guys, and if the guy that you really fell in love with is going to be around at 15, you're going to be hard-pressed to wait. You're not going to want to go too far down because even though I think this is a pretty deep edge rusher draft, that depth is going to run out quickly because of the value of that position. So let's say Denver at 20, for instance. If Denver would be willing to give you – if Denver sees one of those tight ends that they really like, Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, and thinks they're not going to be there and wants to jump to 15 and would give you a third, so Atlanta recoups the third-round pick it lost in the Matthew Judon trade, yeah, jump on that. But if I'm Atlanta, I would be skeptical to go much further lower than that.
There's a lot of people that think it could be possible. However, I do tend to side with you a little bit more in thinking that they could remain at that 15 spot. Now, which player or players in this draft class do you believe would make an actual immediate impact on the defensive side of the ball? Because, Josh, you and I know they need some help over there.
Yeah, but because I think that we're going to talk about a couple of edge rushers shortly, I'm going to start here with cornerback. Will Johnson from Michigan is an interesting guy for me. Coming into the year, Will Johnson, 6'2", 200 pounds, was a top 5 guy across the board at any position. Had some injuries this year, so it's dropped some. Still, people were talking about him like a top 10 guy. Now, he didn't run at the combine because of a kind of a nagging leg thing. He may not run it at Michigan's Pro Day. He may not run before the combine, but this is a guy who's got the perfect size, whose tape looks great. If he gets to 15, Atlanta would be very tempted, even if they don't have a 40 time on record. Atlanta would be very tempted to take him, and I think that would be a good pick, as good as an edge rusher in terms of filling a hole at an elite position. They've got so much data on these guys now because they're all wearing GPS aprons throughout most of their college career if they go to a big school, and Will Johnson certainly did. So I think if some teams are scared by the fact that Will Johnson doesn't run a 40 pre-draft, I think that might work to the Falcons' advantage.
I like that tweet that you put out there. Is anybody interested in this guy? Because the crowd was so large for somebody that was a couple of podiums down. Of course, you're talking about Travis Hunter. But I think a lot of Falcons fans should pay attention to him for sure. And a lot of people, because, Josh, we are in the Atlanta area, there's a lot of Georgia Bulldogs fans around here, obviously, and people are practically begging the Falcons to finally draft a Georgia Bulldog. They've done so in the past, but it's very few and far between. Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams, two guys that are mocked to go fairly high in this year's draft. How realistic is it, do you think, that Atlanta actually chooses a Bulldog in the first round?
If there's going to be a year, you would think this is it, because Jalen Walker and Mykel Williams both would be great fits, although slightly different fits. Jalen Walker is sort of that true 3-4 outside linebacker of 245, 250 pounds, but also has some positional versatility. And if you go back to Jeff Ulbricht's introductory press conference, most recent introductory press conference in Atlanta as he makes his return to the Falcons, he really swore up and down that they were going to try to be multiple, that they were going to try to do things differently. That means getting players who can be multi-positional. Jalen Walker can be that guy. Jalen Walker can play safety in a pinch. He's got that type of athletic ability. He played that hybrid nickel at Georgia. He can play true outside linebacker. He's a guy that everybody who knows seems to love. I think he's a great, safe, high floor, high ceiling guy. Mykel Williams is a little bit different. I think his ceiling is higher than Jalen Walker's, but his floor may be a little lower. Played on a bum ankle last year, wasn't as productive as he thought he should be. He's more of the, 4-3 defensive end, could play end in a 3-4. He's big enough, 265 pounds, 6'4", long arms. Raheem Morris and Jeff Ulbricht love long arms on pass rushers. So they could fall in love with that type of guy. But I think either one of them would make an impact on the defense. And, the Falcons never draft a Georgia player crowd is going to be up in arms if either one of them is around and Falcons don't take him.
Yeah, that's going to be rough. And I like what you were saying about Jalen. He's a guy that everybody likes. I can tell you, everyone loves Jalen Walker on the football field and off of it. That is somebody that you and I know that this Falcons organization loves to hone in on, is guys with big character skills and a lot of ethos. It's what they talk about so much. Jalen Walker fits that mold for sure. Who's a player, or maybe players, that perhaps you feel like isn't getting talked enough that maybe could be a good fit for Atlanta?
Okay, so my wild card guy, and I'm going to mention him even though I'm going to butcher his last name.
Okay.
Is Donovan Eziraku.
Great.
He is an edge rusher from Boston College. The Falcons have had pretty good luck with first rounders from Boston College in recent history. He's moving up draft boards. He was second in major college football last year with 16.5 sacks, behind only Mike Green. He played well at the Senior Bowl against elite competition, and he put up good numbers at the Combine. He was not a guy a lot of people were talking about as a first rounder. And if Atlanta takes him at 15, people will say that's a reach. But keep an eye on him, because I think between now and the first week of April, you're going to hear his name more.
That's a good point, especially because we are so far from the draft at this point in terms of where they're at and evaluating. So much can change between right now and the draft, and even on draft night, as we know very well. So keep your eye on him for sure. All right, let's go current roster really quickly, because one guy who's been thrown out a ton over the last year, really, as a possible trade piece for the Falcons in the future would be Kyle Pitts. And of course, Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris, they were asked about him at the Combine. They raved about him. Josh, what, if anything, did you take away from those conversations with those two when it comes to Kyle Pitts' future in Atlanta?
They both said really good things about him, but they both sort of dropped in a sentence in their answers that made it clear that they're looking for more from Kyle Pitts. And I'll say this. I had, in terms of off the podium, just in the hallway, et cetera, I had as many Kyle Pitts conversations with people as I did Kirk Cousins with conversations, which is saying something, because there were a lot of Kirk Cousins conversations. But the rest of the league still very much is intrigued by Kyle Pitts and what's going on with Kyle Pitts, where I think some Atlanta fans are just tired at this point of having the conversation. The rest of the league is very much in the middle of the conversation. I still don't think that he's a tradable asset for the Falcons this year. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they get the midseason and somebody's looking to take a chance. I think it's more likely that they give Kyle Pitts one more year at a pretty nice salary, a pretty easy salary for the team, I should say, to see if he can break out, and then he enters free agency and he goes somewhere else. I do think this is Kyle's last season in Atlanta, but I do think he'll have a market in 2026 on free agency, because Other teams still are very interested in his athletic ability, and we've seen tight ends who take a marked step forward in their second contract. So that's a position that's kind of known for that. But I'm going into this season thinking we may be seeing the last one with Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, and the best thing for Kyle, kind of what you're talking about, is if he is in Atlanta this year, is to make himself more marketable. Even though everyone around the league seems to be intrigued by him, there is more that Kyle Pitts can produce, back to your point of what Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris was saying earlier. Now, let's finish with the topic that I think we can't get away from, Josh, honestly. It's Kirk Cousins and his future here in Atlanta. It has been the conversation for what feels like an entire year, even though I know that's not the timeline. A lot of reports coming out of Indianapolis indicating that there's some executives around the league who really aren't completely sold on the idea that Kirk is leaving Atlanta for sure. What do you think ultimately happens with Kirk Cousins here in Atlanta?
I think he's gone. I came into the first half of the week, and nobody I talked to for the first 4 or 5 days in Indianapolis believed Atlanta when they said we might keep him. Everybody expects him to hit the open market. By the end of the week, I did hear a whisper that maybe people are starting to think the Falcons aren't really bluffing. I still think the Falcons are bluffing. I don't think you can keep Kirk Cousins in 2026 as your backup. I understand that financially, you can make the financial explanation to me, and I totally get it. He's going to count basically the same money on the salary cap, whether he's playing for you or not. But I don't think it's fair to Kirk Cousins, and more importantly for Atlanta, I don't think it's fair to Michael Penix that they're both on the team next year. You have made clear that Michael Penix is your guy, that he's the guy that you think can carry you into the future. If that's the case, you have to do everything you can to unclutter the path for him to do that. Kirk Cousins, although he was a great teammate to Michael this year, and I think would continue to do his level best to be a great teammate to Michael next year, still would be an elephant in the locker room. And Michael Penix would, because human nature exists and is a thing, would be peeking over his shoulder. And if Michael Penix twists an ankle and Kirk comes in and plays great for a couple of weeks, then you're kind of in a fix, and what do? The Falcons would go back to Penix, but then it would be an issue. So I still think the Falcons are bluffing. I still think Kirk Cousins will play elsewhere next year.
I'm with you, Josh, and if he is, we wish him the best of luck. Of course, he's been tremendous here in Atlanta in his very short time so far here in the A, and hopefully something can happen soon, because I know you and I and everybody else are tired of having to answer these questions. What is going to happen with Kirk Cousins? Josh Kendall breaking everything down with the Combine and the draft for us. Josh, thanks so much.
Thank you.